Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from long ago, old newspaper articles that are in the public domain that we read and try to look at with a modern perspective and see what we can learn. On today's Microfiche Time Capsule, we are looking at an article in the Gentleman's Magazine, also known as the London Magazine, from May 1768. And this article is entitled, Loss of a Part of the Brain, Effects of It. This one is more of a medical article. It does not have any illustrations. However, it does explain what it's trying to say. So just a quick explanation of this newspaper. It was edited by a man named Severus Urban. I'm pretty sure that was a nom de plume. And so all articles are written to him, Mr. Urban. Also, the letter S at the time looked very similar to the letter F, so don't get thrown off by that. I sometimes am. So let's take a look. Mr. Urban, Lee, May 23rd, 1768. Being lately applied to from London by some of the profession for the solution of a singular phenomenon in anatomy, I thought proper to render the same public for the satisfaction of others. So they've discovered something and they want to share it. A lad lately, by falling down the hold of a vessel, fractured his skull, for which he was carried to an hospital and trepanned. Okay, if you don't know what trepanation is, it's really kind of a brutal thing that they did back then, is they would drill a hole in your skull in order to allow some of the liquid to leave it, and it would relieve pressure on the brain. It wasn't necessarily a bad idea, depending on the injury that the person had undergone, and is still sometimes used today, depending on how bad the brain pressure is. Since they didn't have anesthesia at the time, it must have been horrifically painful. What surprised them was that the wounded side enjoyed all its functions freely, while the contrary side, unhurt, directly lost its power of motion and became paralytic by the blow. I think we all know why. However, this was groundbreaking at the time. What they discovered is that, which side was it? Did it say? It just says he fractured his skull. So the side that he was hurt, let's say the right side of his brain, was not working properly, but the right side of his body was, but the left side was not. So what they had discovered is that the motor function of your body is controlled by the opposite hemispheres, which was absolutely unknown. I don't know if it was completely unknown before this, but this was definitely one of the earlier articles about it, because if you look up when the studies were really gone through, like rigorously, to prove that this was true, and it wasn't just a fluke of this individual, we're in the 1960s. So we're talking 200 years later. This is definitely before its time. His fingers on the opposite side continue contracted still, and also his I'm assuming that's his hamstring muscle. Otherwise, as to health and senses, he is as well as ever, although he has lost half of his brains. So they discovered that either the brain tissue was so damaged that it was dead, or I'm wondering if they actually removed it. So let me just look quickly in trepanation. Trepanning, also known as trepanation, trephining, is by making a burr hole. Yeah, it's a surgical intervention in which a hole is drilled or scraped into the human skull. That's what I thought it was. So usually they don't remove parts of the brain. So I'm wondering if they did in this case, since they discovered that it was dead, that the brain tissue was dead. That is possible. If it was like black and going rancid or something, then it's not impossible that they removed it. Or is it just an observation that that half of his brain was not working? I mean, clearly from the evidence means that that's definitely true, because we know today that the brain does crisscross, that the right hemisphere controls the left half of the body and vice versa. I returned answer, nothing was plainer than that it proceeded from the different origin of the nerves from the opposite side in which they terminate, for which end they cross before they make their exit through the vertebral holes in the spine, whence those nerves which spring from the right side terminate in those parts which form the left side, and vice versa. Just as we just said, we know that this is true. Interesting that they had an inkling, at any rate, that this was the case back then. So that the right side of the body on which the brain was wounded was not affected thereby, as expected, but the opposite side, which was supplied by nerves whose origin was from the wounded side, while the other side, supplied by nerves proceeding from the sound side, though opposite thereto, possessed its faculties as freely as if no wound at all had happened. To apply this remark to practice, I leave to the sagacity of the apothecary in properly placing his topics. So they discovered this, but now they have no idea what to do with it. They're like, good to know, I guess. But we use it all the time today, so that's interesting that they thought that it might not be helpful. It's definitely helpful to know. Ask any brain surgeon in the world how helpful it is to know that the motor skills of your body are controlled by the opposite hemisphere. Thus we see observation and experience are the two surest sources of certain knowledge, far beyond all uncertain hypothetical reasonings a priori, however entertaining and instructing. Such may be a posteriori, there's another R, a posteriori. So a priori means before, so things that you were thinking of before. So a posteriori, I'm assuming, means after. So they've discovered things after. Yours, etc., J. Cook. Thank you, Dr. Cook, I'm assuming you're a doctor, for observing this information. And I think that it was extremely helpful to know. Interesting that they didn't do anything with this information for a very long time. But they definitely knew this, and I'm wondering if this wasn't known or observed before this, because people have been around a really long time. Also, different parts of the world, people are all over the world, so if you had a bad concussion or a debilitating injury on one side of your brain that they might not have already discovered, that the opposite side of your body is the one that is immobile. I'm willing to bet that that was observed before that, although I'm not sure that anyone ever noticed that what that might mean, that the nerves crisscrossed in the neck before they go into the spinal cord. But what he's saying is absolutely 100% true. So hats off to you, Dr. Cook. Good job for noticing that and making it public, because I think that was very interesting information, and I think that would be very helpful to lots of other people. So very much appreciate his contribution to medicine, and I'm very happy that today we already knew that and it wasn't a surprise. So yeah, very happy about that. And that was our Microfiche time capsule from today. Please join us next time for another look into the past. And please like and subscribe the video, and I'll see you in the next video.